Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This is episode number 139 of the show, and this week I have 5 new LitRPG titles, just for you folks at home, of course. Now before we begin the actual show, though, I'd want to take a moment to tell you about the good news. The good news, my latest novel. Sorry. I have been spending, oh, that's not it. There it is. That's fine. I've been spending the last few months writing, and I wrote a thing. It's called Planet Bound. It's by me under the title name, an author named Ramon Mejia. It is a sci-fi survival story with augmented reality, a snarky AI, upgrade mechanics, resource gathering, crafting, alien creatures, and space pirates. I have really enjoyed writing the story, and I think people who like my other writings, whether it's Project Alpha or Adventures in Terror, will like the tone of this. They'll like a lot of the mechanics that are in here. However, I should forewarn you, it is not technically LitRPG or GameLit. It is not set in a game world, RPG game world, and it's not set in a world that is ruled by RPG mechanics. So it's not technically LitRPG or GameLit. But again, I kind of was inspired to write the story by like a lot of things in my life. Well, actually everything in my entire life that I've ever written by video games. This one is more inspired by survival games that I've read and enjoyed in space stuff. It has a lot of space elements, again, resource gathering, like limited resources or an actual like thing in the story. There's a definite threat to the main character's life as he crashes on this planet and has to survive on this alien world where everything is trying to kill him, including like the very air. And there are, again, resource gathering, upgrade mechanics. There is an augmented reality system that I added to the story to like give it some like gamified elements. But again, it's not technically LitRPG or GameLit, so just be aware of that. However, I think it's a really good story. There is some action. There's definitely a lot of tension that I've added to the story, along with the help from like some great beta readers and some great editors. So I just want to thank everybody who has helped me write this. But I also just want to know, as if you want to do me a personal favor, check this out. It helps support the podcast. It helps support me as a full-time author now. And I actually think you'll really enjoy the story. So check it out. It's Planet Bound. It is on Amazon. I'll link in the show notes for it in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, all those good places. So thanks a lot for taking the time to just let me go on about a thing I did. Okay. Now on to the stories that are actually being reviewed this week. That includes the story Hero Time, a LitRPG novel, Metagamer Chronicles book number 3, The Arena's Call, Adventures on Brad book number 4, the Arcane Kingdom Online, The Chosen, a LitRPG adventure book number 1. Then after that it'll be Heir Today, Pawn Tomorrow. And then Respawn, Lover's Lost, which is the second book in that series. And so 5 new LitRPG titles for you folks. Before we go into that though, we're going to talk about some LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with the novel Beginnings, Peaks of Power, book number... That is not the right one. I keep doing this. There we go. Nope, there you go. Buttons today. So that's my thing. It's a Peaks of Power Beginnings, book number 1, was supposed to be out this week, but issues arose that may either delay the release. Most people were going to watch this on a Friday, which is when this book was originally supposed to release, but it may be delayed, or it may require those that pre-order to download the latest edition. It kind of depends on what happens with the publisher. The publishers are Mountain Dale Press. They say they're working on getting everything straightened out as soon as possible. They apologize for any delays or any issues that may come up with this novel, but it may be delayed, or it just may like get a fresh new edition as soon as it comes off the block. There's some issues though, so just a heads up about that. Otherwise, I would have been talking about it as a review, so just some stuff. Okay, also in LitRPG news, GameLit Society is running their annual charity drive, and in only a few days, it's been about a week basically, less than actually a week, they have had a goal of over getting $2,000 to send to the Shriners Hospital for Kids, and they met that goal. Like, they've surpassed that goal. At the time I originally took a screenshot, they were only about halfway to that goal, and like a couple days into the charity drive. And since then, like, they've already shot past $2,000. But that doesn't mean that they still can't take money and still can't give all that money to Shriners Hospital for Kids. The podcast has definitely already given a good donation. And there are going to be some gifts donated by LitRPG GameLit authors, including things like signed books. But beyond that, it's just kind of a way for the LitRPG community to give back to, good places that do good things. So remember, we do this for the children, folks. Think of the children. But of course, we'll have a link in the show notes so you can click on it and go donate to that particular charity drive. Okay, last but not least in LitRPG news, actually this is the last episode before Halloween this year, and I figured I'd put together like a little small list of like some semi-scary LitRPG horror stories, at least the ones that creep me out when I read them, and that includes, let's see, we have 3 novels, The Nightmare Game Slayers by S.R. Witt, Digital Shadow series, which is a 2-book series, and book 2 is definitely the creepier of the two, especially the ending of book 2, like super duper creepy, by Ethan Crow, and also Galen Wolfe's Dark Worlds London. Now, the Nightmare Game Slayers is kind of like a slasher film with RPG mechanics, and it's actually a good RPG mechanics. Like, S.R. Witt has always done a really good job with the game mechanics he puts in his LitRPG stories, and it's definitely probably the goriest of the 3 stories. Digital Shadow is like almost like a trapped in a horror game, supernatural element stuff, and then this game stuff starts getting too real as game elements come into the real world and some other like creepy things happening there. So there's that. And then Galen Wolfe's Dark Worlds London is Cthulhu Madness. It's actually set like in the 1920s. There's this whole the game portion in the news, and there's like some legitimately creepy bendy stuff. There's like Cthulhu mythology and that kind of stuff. You'll probably like this one too, but again, definitely on the creepier side of stuff. So that is my Halloween edition of the podcast, I guess. But there you go. Okay, on to some stories that are out now, but haven't had a chance to read them, including Vortina, Everybody Loves Large Chess, volume number 3, I should say. It is out now, folks. If you enjoy the series, the 3rd volume is out. Also out as an omnibus, The Realms Omnibus Volume 1, written by C.M. Kearney. It actually has the first 2 books in the series for a relatively good price, but it's also on Kindle Unlimited, and there's also a bonus short story in there that revolves around some dungeon core stuff for like the first book, The Borrow King. It's like a little side story in that series from that particular novel. Also out now is Warlock Reign of Blood by Edwin McCrae, as is a new story called Necromancer System, a Dark Fantasy LitRPG, and Zombie Slayer. That's what it's called. It's out now. Also out is Crafter's Heart by Chris Snee. And there you go. That's all the stuff here. Okay, on to new LitRPG audiobooks. We have Obliteration, Unbound Deathlord, book number 2. That is out as an audiobook, so if you're a fan of the Unbound Deathlord series, definitely want to check that out. Also out is Succubus, the first book in that series. Worldkeeper Precursor, the 3rd book in the Worldkeeper series by Justin Miller, is out as an audiobook. Limitless Lands, The Commander's Tale, Liberty Adventure is out as an audiobook. And the 8th book in the Emerald series, Beyond All Expectations, is out as well as them. So all kinds of great audiobooks are out for you folks who love your LitRPG audiobooks. Okay, some stuff that's coming out in the near future. This is a whole list of things. There are some new additions to this list, but it's just stuff I'm going to read off. On October the 28th, it'll be the Cuisard Mountains, the Dungeon Core Epic, Dacian Core book number 2. Out on October the 30th, it'll be Survivors, Starcraft Chronicles book number 2. So fun stuff there. On October the 31st, it'll be Base Status Online, an Unlikely Heroes LitRPG Journey. On November the 1st, this is new to the list, it should be Super Sales and Superheroes 3 will be out. On November the 1st as well, it'll be Never Fall, Mark of the Hero. November the 1st is going to also be the day of Sorcerer's Quest, a LitRPG adventure. November the 2nd will be Dungeon Desolation, Divine Dominion, book number 4. On the 2nd of November as well, it'll be Visaria Online, Odyssey. November the 8th, Parallel, Infinite Exodus, book number 2. November the 15th will be the Feedback Loop, book number 8. I think the author mentioned that this might be the last book in the series, but he didn't pass any cover art onto me, so he just let me know it'll be out on November the 15th, though. On November the 18th, there'll be Guardians of the Round Table, book number 3. On November 19th, A Song of Shadow, The Bard of Barleona, book number 2. November the 20th, it'll be Island Kingdom War Evolution Online, book number 3. November 22nd, this one's into the list, Fates of Camlin, a LitRPG Adventure, Camlin Realm, book number 4. If you like that series, 4th book is out. November the 30th, Eden's Gate. It'll be the 5th book in that series called The Omen. On December the 10th, Hero Level Up, book number 2. On December the 16th, Freehaven Online, Winter Dungeon Line, book number 3. And December the 19th, it'll be Dungeon Mauling. This is the 3rd book in the Good Guy series. I'm actually reviewing the 2nd book in that series today in this particular podcast. That'll be out again on December 19th. And then the side story in the Level Up universe should be called Level Up The Knockout. So it's the same universe as the other Level Up series, but it's a different main character. It'll be out on January the 9th, 2019. So be aware. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. And the new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with that button I kept pressing. There we go. Hero Time, written by Xavier P. Hunter. It is the 3rd book in the Metagamer Chronicle series. So there we go. It is 175 pages, $4.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Honestly, the price point alone is going to be a little more than I normally pay, but it is also the last book in the series, and for me it was very nice. I'll read you the author's description to get you an idea of what it's about. The difference between a hero and a tyrant is charisma. Fresh off their defeat of the Lich army, Gary and his friends find themselves preparing for an even larger threat. While unlocking Elder Magic gave them the juice they needed to turn aside one foe, it unstoppered the bottle holding back an ancient evil. Gary knows what's coming because he wrote it. Now the political responsibility is crushing him from one side and a demonic army looming on the other. Gary must balance the necessity of victory with the means to achieve it. After all, what good is saving a kingdom only to become the villain? So there we go again. So the price point's a little expensive. So if you're not a fan of the series, if you didn't like books 1 and book 2, you probably don't want to pick up book 3. But why would you if you didn't like those two? But if you enjoy the series, this is actually a really nice conclusion, and it is a full conclusion to the series. Everything's wrapped up very nicely. The story is rushed in a couple places. Like you can tell, like the author is kind of pushing to make sure all the story threads are wrapped up very nicely. But it does feel rushed, especially towards like the beginning, middle of the story. But despite that, and a few like annoying time jumps, the way that the story plays out is kind of the way that I wanted the story to play out from the very beginning. In the very first book in the series, the main character Gary was too passive. He was alone. He was the only person in the very first novel. The main character and his friends are playing a tabletop dungeon game. They get transported into the game. That's kind of the premise of the story. But only in this case, only the main character Gary is aware that he's been transported to a game. He's the only one who retains the knowledge of him being the dungeon master, and he's the only one who's not his character class because he was the DM. All the other of his friends have been, their minds have been like almost wiped and their memories are gone, and they believe that they are their characters that they had on their character sheets. And while that's a very interesting concept, it was a very very lonely, singular story because it was only Gary who was making the pop culture jokes or having any game references or had any knowledge of like the game mechanics. In book 2, that does definitely shift in that there's one more person who he can finally talk to. But still, it's a very kind of isolated, smaller story. But in book 3, finally the main character and all of his friends are all fully aware that they're in their tabletop game, and it's really a lot more fun when you have other people you can make jokes with. You can have other people who you can make cultural references to, and they all get it, and you can banter more. It's a much more fuller book with a more aware cast at this point. So that, like I said, there's still plenty of good metagaming here, exploitation of GM knowledge, banter, and the end is probably the best part of the story. It's very touching. It wraps up the series very nicely. It's a really good ending. So it gets a score for me of 7.6 out of 10. That's Hero Time, a LitRPG novel, Metagamer Chronicles, book number 3, with a score of 7.6 out of 10. There we go. Okay, next review is for The Arena's Call, Adventures on Brad, book number 4, written by Tao Wong. It is 147 pages, $3.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited either. So neither one of these books are on Kindle Unlimited. So there you go. Again, this is the author's description. As advanced adventurers, Daniel and his friends journey to Silverholt to attempt larger and more dangerous dungeons. But just because they've graduated from beginner dungeons doesn't mean that they'll get any more respect from the experienced adventurers that make up their new city. They'll have to train, struggle, and take part in an arena battle to win a chance at entering the new dungeon and some respect. So there we go. This is, if you like this series, you kind of like either like this series or you don't mind now. So the first book in the series, it's a very slice of life adventure kind of story. It is not, it's, nobody's transported anywhere in this case. Like the main character and all the characters are all from this world who's ruled by RPG mechanics. So it's more of that kind of concept. And it's a good action-filled story. The main character, it's really just like a dungeon dive and a tournament for our heroes. And then there's some development stuff related to Daniel's healing powers and some social conflicts with like some guilds and stuff. And that's it. It's really, it's fun. It's slice of life. And if you like the series, you'll like this. Do I do? I've always really enjoyed just like chilling with the story, kicking back and just like reading it with like some soda or like a beer or something and just like enjoying it. So it's a really, it's not a heavy pace, but like the action's good, the adventure is good, but it's also like you can pick it up and you can put it down at your leisure, and it's very fine. Score 7.4 out of 10. So there you go. That's The Arena's Call, Adventures on Brad, book number 4 with the score of 7.4 out of 10. Okay, on to our next review, Arcane Kingdom Online, The Chosen, a LitRPG adventure, book number 1, written by Jacob Tanner. Okay, it is 232 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Log in or die. Those are the only choices left to Clay Hopefield. Infected with the Zero virus, he has less than 24 hours before he bites the dust. With no cure available, there's only one option left. Digitally reincarnate himself in the most advanced virtual reality game ever, the mysterious and newly released Arcane Kingdom Online. But cheating death and gaining immortality isn't that easy. If Clay survives the risky cognitive upload process, he'll still have to contend with a fantasy world teetering on the brink of crisis. Worse, a quarter of the in-game population hates his starting race. He can't elect the mage class he wants, and the malevolent glitch threatens to upend the very existence of this new world. If Clay doesn't learn the rules of his new surroundings quickly, his second chance at life will be a lot worse than his first. There we go. Okay, here's the review portion. I was honestly a little annoyed at this story, and that's mostly because when I first read it, I thought, okay, this has like really good potential. But in the end, I was just like kind of disappointed with how it actually turned out. The first 10% is kind of that setup portion of the rural stuff that pushes the main character into the game world. And it's a little annoying because it sets up this zombie apocalypse virus in this world. And it is a bunch of like real world development of like what's happening in the world. And then when the main character's mind is up to the game, all that other stuff disappears. Like it really doesn't matter. It comes up like I think it's mentioned twice in the story. But everything else is in game. And so all that other stuff that was developed with the first 10% didn't matter at all. And it wasn't really set up amazingly well, but still it was a little annoying that the fact that it just didn't matter. Once the main character is in the game, after that 10% mark, again, the story starts out really promising. As somebody who reads a ton of like LitRPG stories and a lot of them being fantasy based, they all kind of start off very similarly. Character creation, you're dropped into the world, you maybe get a guide and you go do some beginner stuff, right? This game started out differently. This I should say, this beginning of the story of the game world. The main character spawns captured by these rat creatures. Like he uses a bunch of fancy names, which is a different issue because why not just use regular fantasy names that everybody's familiar with? But still, he's captured by these rat creatures, by these rat men, and he has to escape and fight his way out with the help of another NPC prisoner. And I thought, oh, this is a good, different kind of strat. You know, I've seen it in like other video games, but I haven't seen like that particular start where you're like just dropped into like a weird situation very often. And so this one felt a little weird. And I was hoping, oh, this is going to be really good because like the author drops a lot of game mechanics right off the bat as soon as the story starts. And I was like, oh, maybe this will be different. And unfortunately, it has issues, especially with the game mechanics and a lot of plot armor that kind of ruined the story for me in a lot of ways. Again, I'm going to say that there are some good game mechanics shown here. Unfortunately, and by the very first fight, you can see, oh, those game mechanics, even though they're shown, don't really matter to the story. Like the game mechanics are technically followed, but the author is definitely twisting them so that the main character has a ton of plot armor. And the rest of the story is pretty much power leveling, some magic unlocking stuff, until the main character deals with like the major plot point. Now there are some story issues here. Another reviewer mentioned that the ending in the storyline was a ripoff of Dot Hack Sign. And to a degree, you can kind of see where the statement is coming from. The story does seem to borrow major plot points, elements, I should say, from that series. One where corrupted monsters with jumbled up names appearing can permanently delete players, and the main character seems to be able to hear the voice of a girl who has the power to stop the monster somehow, and he himself becomes corrupted because of it and gains some kind of control of the game. And I'm like, and as I read the story, I was like, oh, I see that when the major plot arcs kind of point up again, I'm like, oh yeah, I see what that reviewer meant. And while again, it's not, he's not ripping anything else off in the story, like it really isn't. And even that particular concept isn't like totally original to Dot Hack Sign. But again, a lot of people who are going to read this story like might find that particular plot arc like, oh, super duper familiar if they've read that story, because it does parallel it in a lot of ways. But beyond that, the rest of the world is original. The history of the world, the characters, the races, the game mechanics, the main character, all the other stuff is completely original. And different from that anime. Game mechanic wise, there is a good amount of detail given in the story again. Character sheets, item descriptions, game mechanics, skill gains, damage notifications, a lot of like tech stuff. Unfortunately, again, the author doesn't seem to always follow his own rules and twist again the story so that his characters are saved again and again, either by omitting information like a monster's level suddenly, or being saved by a character with like unrevealed levels, or by conveniently creating mechanics to save the main character or the characters in the story. The biggest culprit in this instance is the plot armor game mechanic, where when someone levels, all the injuries are healed, their HP and mana are restored, and all their status elements and debuffs are removed. Now, when we say all the injuries here, I mean, at one point, the main character literally has like this giant gaping wound in his stomach from like being stabbed repeatedly in the stomach, and he's about to die. And then the other NPC character he's been grouped with just happens to have killed enough other rat creatures that main character levels, even though he hasn't killed anybody. And suddenly that gaping wound just closes and heals itself up. And the main character is again health restored, mana restored, the multiple status elements. He's had like this huge bleeding debuff, which is supposed to have killed him in like a few seconds, just magically disappears. And again, I don't necessarily have a problem with that mechanic itself. You see things like that in video games on a fairly regular basis. That's fine. Even though it's kind of an OP mechanic in a story. But where I kind of have the problem is that when it's used no less than 4 times in the first 25% of the story to miraculously save the main character from death, because the NPC he happens to be grouped with again just happens to kill enough monsters out of sight of like the author, out of scene, to just happen to give the main character a new level, and again replenish his health when he's right on the brink of death. And the rest of the story does also follow a lot of the same wave 1D combat situations where the main character should have died more than the one time in the story that he did. And because he again regularly fights monsters that are like sometimes 3 to 5 times his level in the story, and only again survives because again information about damage suddenly disappears, or the reader is told he scores like a series of critical hits until the monster is dead or is saved by that plot armor. So that was probably the biggest issue I had with the story. And again, it's one along like, it's a little annoying just because you can tell the author went out of his way to create game mechanics in the story, and for the most part they show up pretty well and they're really detailed, but there's really no point to having all that there when you're just going to ignore them, or you're just going to like use them to create plot armor for your character, especially when like there's no real reason for him not to die, because in this game world the only real penalty for dying is like a death debuff, which lasts for a couple hours, and while it's like not the lightest debuff I've ever seen, that's kind of all there is to it. And so it didn't make sense to me why the main character didn't die more when he really should have in the story. Overall, again, while the initial game story showed promise, it quickly became a disappointment when I recognized the Dot Hack Sign plot story, which I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen now. And the main character had a lot of plot armor, which just made like his accomplishments less fulfilling, less interesting to me. And again, this is not a poorly written story in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't even boring for the most part. It was just disappointing, and because of those elements, it wasn't good for me. So it gets a 6 out of 10. So that's Arcane Kingdom Online, The Chosen, a LitRPG adventure book number 1 with a score of 6 out of 10. There we go. Okay, on to our next review. It's going to be Heir Today, Upon Tomorrow, a LitRPG GameLit novel, The Good Guys, book number 2, written by Eric Ugland. There we go. It is 252 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Montana's new life in Voldurania, the medieval fantasy game world he's lucked into, isn't quite the tranquil extended fishing trip he'd been hoping for. But you gotta admit, he's doing pretty well for himself. Now he's Montana Cogshell, heir to a dukedom, if he can get his crew to Ostradant to claim it in time. Heir to Pondamar is a heart-pounding adventure through uncharted territory. Montana and his party must cross War Waters, a lake that offers everything but a pleasure cruise, and then race through a dense, forbidden forest full of hungry beasts, unfriendly races, and a few cocky nobles. If you're ready for an epic quest full of hell beasts, ghost whales, and worm guts, this is the book for you. And honestly, that's a really good description of like a good portion of the story. Full disclosure, I received an advance copy of this novel for review. I purchased it when it became available. It is out now, so you can go check it out. And honestly, this is such a good series. It really is. Book 1 of the series, I really enjoyed. I was surprised at how good it was. Book 2 is equally, if not a little bit better for me, which is why it gets a slightly better score than Book 1. And honestly, the series is quickly becoming like a really favorite of mine. Like, in some ways, it kind of reminds me of, I forget another story. It's the one where the characters, Dragon's Wrath. That's a Dragon's Wrath. It reminds me a lot of Dragon's Wrath in like its tone of like brutality a little bit, and some of like the way that it's leading to some kingdom building stuff eventually. Like I think that'll start in book 3. But it's like it's has a really nice mix of like fantasy descriptions, but with like good RPG mechanics, and the RPG mechanics aren't so heavy that they kind of overweigh anything. And I think it's a really, really good balance between the two. The game mechanics again are really regular, really detailed. I went to a little more detail of what they were in the review for book 1. So if you checked out that review, the mechanics are the same. More importantly, though, I think in book 2, the main character acts so much like a gamer. It's like you feel if you've been a gamer, it's like when I was reading this, I was like, if I was a gamer in the story, I would be doing very similar things. Like this is a little slightly spoiler. The main character has a bag of holding in the story, and the way he uses is as like this exploit. Like I would be doing the exact same thing, just like stuffing everything in there, just like to sell it off later. It doesn't matter what it is: rusty old weapons, old chairs, tables, whatever fits into the hole. And I would be explaining it exactly. And it's like that gamer mentality that's coming across in the story that I think really resonates with me as a video gamer. Even though like sometimes there's these little stretches of the story where there aren't a lot of game mechanics, the fact that he's acting like a gamer and having gamer behaviors that translating from like his time as a gamer into this fantasy RPG world makes total sense, and it kind of makes up for that a little bit. Again, good story, characters are well written, good action, good adventure, good story, and with some really good twists. The story itself doesn't do anything new, but it does a lot of things really, really well. Really nice story. Gets a score of 7.8 out of 10. That's Heir Today, Pondamar, a LitRPG GameLit novel, the good guys book number 2. So definitely go check that out. Okay, on to our next review is going to be Respawn. Lovers Lost, Respawn LitRPG series book number 2, last review of the show. It is 244 pages, $4.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. The system is generous, not with presents, but with predicaments. Cheater now has a straightforward goal, or so it seems. To everyone else, the endeavor sounds suicidal for a high-level veteran, never mind a newcomer whose intellect is still shackled by the system. Cheater sees only one way forward: develop his skills, conquer monsters, and become stronger, faster, wiser, and more fearsome with each passing day. Until he makes progress on his own capabilities, he cannot hope to achieve anything else. But the system has intentions of its own, namely, to hit Cheater with every step of the way with unforeseen, unpleasant refutations of his noble plans. Wow, a lot of words. Okay. Honestly, it's been a little while since I read book number 1 in the series, and I kind of forgot the premise of the story, and reading it took a little while to remind me. But it's basically the main character is in like this Groundhog Day like RPG apocalypse where every time he dies, he's reset to right before the apocalypse happens, and that's when people start turning to zombies, monsters appear, electronics and cars stop working, and a bunch of mayhem occurs. And however, he and other players get to respawn a certain number of times and level from killing creatures and each other. Higher levels, more stats, other game-like bonuses, but all players get reduced intellect and wiped memories until they hit level 10. The main character in the story starts at level 4, I believe, and he's on the 6th respawn, which is why. There it is. Okay, now book 2 in the series continues on from the very end of book 1. And kind of resets things. By the end of book 1, the main character is feeling a little bit overpowered, I should say. And at the beginning of book 2, all that's reset because he's transferred to a different cluster, so he's in an unfamiliar location, and he kind of starts over. And the first 25-30% of the story is a little bit slow, and it's a little hard to get through if you've read the first book recently, because a lot of what happens in the first 20% of this novel is kind of what's repeated in the other novel in book 1, where he's just doing basic survival stuff. You see a lot of the same monsters. He's kind of repeating his actions from book 1 because that's what he's learned, and that's how he's learned to survive. And so he's kind of just repeating those things. But after that 30% mark, the story really does get better. This is basically a slice of life story. He's journeying and he's leveling. It's kind of the transitional story where he's not making major plot advancements this story. It's him kind of trying to power level so that he can eventually go after the girl that I don't want to say loves or not, but the girl he would partner up with in the last story, Kitty. And again, it's very slice of life. The main character just fights a bunch. He tries to find exploits in the system so that he can kind of gain the goals he wants to. So it's very introspective, how do I work the system with my stats and my abilities and his special characteristics that he's using. But it's a lot of fighting and it's a lot of survival stuff. So if you're into that kind of zombie apocalypse stuff, elements with survival elements and RPG mechanics all mixed together, you might like the story. I did. I think I like this one a little bit less than the book one, just because again, that first section repeats a lot of the things that were found in book 1 that you feel oh, I've already been in this territory before. And it's not until after the 30% mark that you get some new elements and you get some new backstory and some new history of the world and some new monsters and new situations that feel a little more new, basically. So, but for me, still a good story. I like slice of life stories though, so just be aware of that. I give the score 7.2 out of 10. That's Respawn, Lovers Lost, Respawn LitRPG series, book number 2, with a score of 7.2 out of 10. There we go. That's it, folks. Short episode. We're done. That's the end. Thanks, everyone. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Patreon, on our website. If you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find all the ways to do so at LitRPGpodcast.com/support. But you can also make sure to check out this novel, Planet Bound, by me. It is out now. Again, sci-fi survival story with a bunch of things that I think, if you like LitRPG and if you like the stuff that I've written before, I think you'll really enjoy this. I had a good time writing it. So go check it out, please. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart if you download a sample, see if you like it. And if you do like it and you read it and you read the whole novel, please remember to leave a review, because those are super, super important to getting those Amazon algorithms working and getting the eyeballs on new stuff. So there you go. Thank you very much for hanging out with me, ladies and gentlemen. And until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG.